So much. I am very excited about this subject, and we were chatting a little bit before this class, or before this lecture started, about how we were all really excited about American sycamores and kind of geeked out about that. So I'm the lucky one that gets to talk about them. The American sycamore is one of the largest trees that we have. They grow up to 75 to 100 feet tall, and less commonly, they can reach up to 150 feet. So their trunks will sometimes even get to a diameter of 6 to 8 feet, huge. And then they can get up to 16 feet around if they're super happy and growing really, really well. They grow in average soil, but they do like to have wet feet. So if they're close to a water source, here in Virginia, we have a lot along the Potomac River, and you'll see them just, with half of their root system, it seems like, in the ground, and they're huge and beautiful and majestic, and it's just really, really cool. And they also are tolerant of urban pollutants, which is useful for our area as well. Next slide, please. So we had a class about this year, and after I learned about this program, I couldn't share that as part of this presentation. Here in Virginia, we have a program called Virginia Big Trees, and it's coordinated through the Department of Forest Resources and Environmental Conservation at Virginia Tech. And I don't know how you get this job, but I'm jealous of them for having it. They maintain a registry of over 300 big trees in our state. So this is a photo of our Virginia champion sycamore. It's here in Fairfax. And like I said, they're really happy along the river. So this is along the Potomac and Great Falls. And this illustrates the fact that sycamores like it best when they can keep their feet wet by growing in water. And the quote that I liked about this, because they go through and they talk about each tree and its location and growing conditions. It's an enormous, tall, triple trunk sycamore in very healthy condition. And the circumference is measured at, that must be a typo, 12 feet, because it's definitely larger than 12 inches. I apologize for that. Next slide, please. So like I said, we're all a little bit part of the Sycamore fan club, but I think they're just beautiful year round. And this is the fall color. You see the foliage change color, and they're huge, great big canopy trees, really lovely fall color. Next slide, please. And then even when they don't have any leaves, I think they're still beautiful. And the most striking thing about the sycamore is its bark. It gets that kind of peeling, the outer layer peels off, and then you see that beautiful white smooth bark underneath. And they're just gorgeous. So, even when you don't have a single leaf on that tree, it's the dead of winter, you get to see this beautiful, bark and branch structure. Next slide, please. And then this is the part that, sycamores, we had one in our yard growing up as a kid. And so I always remember these little seed balls and thinking they were sort of magical. So they appear in the fall and persist into the winter, and they'll fall off the tree, and then they gradually disintegrate into fuzz and disperse the seeds. And it's like nature's bubble wrap. Go out and disperse them and have them float off in the air. It's really cool. Next slide, please. So after fangirling about sycamore, there are a few diseases that affect them, and one of those is Sycamore anthracnose, and I hope I'm saying that correctly. This is a fungal disease, and it can cause a couple problems. It can cause leaf drop, twig dieback, cankers, and sometimes, in really severe cases, really sudden death of more than 90% of a tree's new shoot growth. The good news is that, this is usually not a serious disease in sycamores. They, most of the foliage survives. So it's not something to worry about unless you see it causing, really, really significant damage. Next slide, please. So this is caused during cool, wet weather in the spring. We don't know what that's like right now because we get cool, hot weather, different problems right now. But the spores are produced in the spring, and then they get spread by the rain. So as new leaves emerge, they turn brown, they wilt, they'll fall off. You can see some cankers develop on the leaves. Sometimes it can be mistaken for frost damage, but like I said, most of the time it'll push out new growth once this first dieback happens, and it'll go on to be fine. Next slide, please. So if you're super worried about, I'm sorry, next slide. I got one. So this, like I said, this really results in the death of the tree. If you give it some time, usually, you'll get some new growth that is healthy and the tree will survive. You can practice good sanitation if you want to protect or prevent this. Rake up the leaves, twigs, and put them, dispose of them if you think there's disease present. You can prune out the dead branches, again, dispose of those. Don't put them in your compost. You can, if there's disease present, put it in your actual trash. And then if you're really concerned about, I'm sorry, I have one more slide. So next slide, please. So if the damage is really severe, you can apply a fungicide. Because sycamores get so big, this might not be the most feasible project for you to tackle on your own as a home gardener. So contacting an arborist might be helpful. Or if you're planting a new tree, like we've talked about with a lot of vegetable plants, there are resistant varieties. So you can get a cultivar that's resistant to Sycamore anthracnose. Some of those are Bloodgood, Columbia, or Liberty. And then my next slide are just my sources. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Caitlin, there was a question about the anthracnose. Is it fatal, which I think you pretty much addressed in your presentation, but I don't know if you want to follow up on that or not.
It's very rarely results in in severe and systemic damage to the tree. In severe cases, there are sometimes weird branching patterns. So if you're trying to grow a perfect specimen tree and that bothers you, you might have a problem with it, but rarely does it kill the full tree.
Okay, that's all we had for the sycamore.
Thanks, Scott.